Welcome to everything you're going to need to know about refinement using Rebingy with one of the foremost experts in appraisal. I am so thrilled to have Craig Lipsey with us.
Very happy to be here, and I really appreciate that compliment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Before we get into specifically the refinements as they relate to Rebingy, I want to get your take on the subjectivity of your business and how the application of comps can either be true to form or manipulated to try and create a value that is desired because a buyer and a seller have agreed upon that price. So give me your experience on that. Give me your take on that.
With regards to appraisal and subjectivity, first of all, you've got a human element. So every appraiser is different. And while we have standards, professional standards, when it comes to appraising a property and picking comps, there are no standards. It's the appraiser's opinion of what he deems are the most relevant sales, the subject property that he's appraising. Obviously, there's certain components that are very important, but you can deviate from those. We all know location is the number one factor. Getting beyond that, we've got things that you can quantify, but there's still subjectivity in how you approach them and evaluate them. The size of a lot, the utility of that lot, the view component, which is very important in the local market and in a lot of neighborhoods. The improvements themselves, the quality of a house, the condition of a house, the age of a house, the appeal of a house, the functional layout, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, all of these things just come under improvements. So Rebingy is isolated some of these individually, which is great, so that you can adjust for certain differences. There's a lot of things, ancillary things as well. Garages, amenities, pool, tennis court, guest houses. In some neighborhoods are more important than in others. Your base point is you're comparable and what it's selling for, and you're making adjustments off of that price.
So let's use $3 million as a basis.
Okay.
In and around $3 million. And now we talk about those variables.
Okay. If you're looking at view property, how do you derive value from a non-view property? Sometimes you got no choice, but then there's a subjectivity of how much is that view worth? Is it worth 5%, 10%? View is nice to work with on a percentage standpoint, though. But so you're applying a constant.
Right. So as agents in the trenches, we're walking through a property, right? In our minds, we're calibrating, all right, this comp against that comp, and this condition of property is better. We're doing all the things on an amateur level. I mean, we're professionals, but we're not appraisers, right? And we're being charged with that when the seller is saying, well, what do you think my house is worth? So we have to go through all those calibrations. And you were so instrumental in this when we were designing Rebingy and breaking out those different variables so that we could try to not only quantify them, but then incorporate them into the objectification of the value of a property.
Right, yeah.
And being able to go through it with the seller and say, well, let's talk about your view. Let's talk about your condition of property. So as an agent, how could you better guide an agent who has Rebingy in their hand and they're talking about different criteria? You referenced that the percentage of value and not to exceed the 10%. But what about, say, an adverse condition? Because you've got an X factor with Rebingy. Let's say you're on a busy street. How would you allot for that in your evaluation?
I like to work with percentages because you can see how reasonable it is. The other way to do that is to maybe look at two comparables against each other and see what the variation was. So if you had something on Sunset Boulevard and you had another comp that was not on Sunset Boulevard, and compare those two to one another, if they had a lot of other similar characteristics, and see what was that adverse influence, like traffic, like being on Sunset Boulevard. 10% would be a too low of an adjustment versus a property that's on the interior of the neighborhood. You got to really apply to your specific property that you're appraising and know that neighborhood what is important.
I love that. So let's talk about now the market condition around that property. You know, we've got, let's use two different scenarios. You've got plus or minus 10% for a $4 million property. You've got 8 things that are available for sale. You've only got one thing that's in escrow and only one thing that's sold in the last 90 or 160 days, right? 180 days.
Right.
How does that impact your assessment of value for the property you're now appraising?
You've got to look at what would compete with your property. You know, I mean, of course, we're looking at sales. You've got to use actual sales. Lenders also like to see an active listing and ideally something under contract. That being said, listing prices is going to be aspirational. An appraiser, if he's going to use an active listing, might think it's overpriced and make an adjustment off of that listing price for, I call it price negotiation. I do look at what's competitive. I will say right now in today's market, there's a lot of areas where there isn't inventory. And so that's a factor too, because if there is no inventory, then from an appraisal standpoint, it's hard to make a specific adjustment. But if I got my range of value and I see there's no inventory and I know this is a good property, I'm going to go towards my upper end of the range. If there's a lot of competition and this isn't as good a property, probably going to go towards the lower end of your range.
The activity in the immediate area does play into how you assess the value of a specific property, yes?
It does. I
Yeah.
think you've got to look at what's your competition,
Sure.
what's out there, because you're giving a current market value. So a current market value has got to be on market condition. Can I give you one example?
I want you to. Yes.
I'm appraising a house in Santa Monica, north of Montana. Okay. To date this year, there's been 90 sales, 86 sales, something like that. So that's eight a month. Okay. There's 8 listings right now in the entire neighborhood. The lowest price is a house on Montana for $5 million. There are no other listings. The next lowest price listing is $7.995 million. This is a neighborhood that has sales between 3 and 5 million, 3 and 6 million. There's 0 active listings. That's influencing how I'm appraising a couple of properties right now, because there is no competition. If they came on, there'd be 20 buyers for them. What the comps are showing might be one thing, but I'm saying, I think it's higher, you know?
Well, that's where that market heat dynamic of Rebingy is so impactful to
Absolutely.
articulate
Yeah,
value on every level.
that's a really good tool to look at and plug it in, because that's going to give you your adjusted price.
Right.
And put it in real time, as you say.
Right. And that's what Rebingy, it is, the pricing is influenced by that market heat dynamic.